Welcome back to Freedom Facts and Firearms. My name is Novak, and today we'll be looking at some of the arms restrictions and attempts at disarmament the English royals took, their results, and if they had any impact in the American colonies. Under English law and the 1689 English Bill of Rights, carrying common arms in a peaceful manner was lawful, but armed assemblies were regarded as treasonous. This stance was outright rejected in the U.S. and documented in Blackstone's commentaries. The very use of weapons by such an assembly, without the king's license, unless in some lawful and special cases, carries a terror with it, and a presumption of warlike force. The bare circumstance of having arms, therefore, of itself, creates a presumption of warlike force in England, and may be given in evidence there to prove quo animo with what motive the people are assembled. But ought that circumstance of itself to create any such presumption in America, where the right to bear arms is recognized and secured in the Constitution itself? In many parts of the United States, a man no more thinks of going out of his house on any occasion without his rifle or musket in his hand, than a European fine gentleman without his sword by his side. The thoughts here are that while the king in England viewed armed groups as treasonous and a warlike force, the nobles were allowed to carry swords daily, even in times of peace. In America, it was just as common and accepted that the average man go about his day armed with a rifle or musket as it was for an English noble to carry a sword. Arms laws went back and forth as new kings, queens, and families ascended and descended the throne in England. Henry VII and Henry VIII of the Tudor family would restrict arms, banning ownership of crossbows and handguns. Henry VIII would also go on to allow the search of any home upon suspicion of an illegal crossbow or handgun being within it. This is one act that led to the Fourth Amendment of the United States. It was under Edward VI that hail shot was banned. Hail shot would be the equivalent of modern buckshot or birdshot for a shotgun. Mary and Philip repealed most arms restrictions and then mandated that all people within a state of 10 pounds or more shall have a harquebus, the main military long gun at the time. Those between 5 and 10 pounds were required to have a bow and a sheaf of arrows, and those below 5 pounds were to be armed at public expense during times of emergency. King James I would later repeal Mary and Philip's laws and reinstitute the restrictive laws Mary and Philip repealed. Queen Elizabeth I sought to ban pocket guns in 1559 and ordered the arrest of anyone who carried guns into towns. Illegal carry by bird hunters, common and ordinary travelers, ruffians, and other lewd and dissolute men was so common the laws were rarely enforced and near impossible to enforce, so nothing much came from the order. Elizabeth was more relaxed on hunting laws, as she herself enjoyed hunting. So as you can see, gun laws and restrictions varied based on who the ruler was at the time. Most bans were on items the monarchy deemed too dangerous or commonly used in crimes. To few people's surprise, once something had become commonplace, it was near impossible to enforce the restrictions, and the vast majority of them failed or had no effect anyway. That sounds a lot like what's going on in the United States right now, with people pushing for laws on things that have been so common that their enforcement would be near impossible or would have no effect. To no surprise to anyone with common sense, attempts to disarm and restrict the people were never well received. The climax of these events led to the English Civil War of 1642, the Glorious Revolution in 1688, and the creation of the English Bill of Rights. In 1610, King James I ordered the disarmament of all Catholics. In 1613, he ordered the ban of all import guns with a barrel less than 12 inches, and their carry, in order to stop concealed carry. In 1616, the order was expanded to domestic guns as well, and in 1617, all weapons were banned for those on the Scottish-English border. Commoners were also banned from possessing horses. Oddly, for all the gun restrictions James I would make in England, he had a different approach to the American colonies. It was under James I that the first successful American colony was established in 1606. As a side note, it's important to note that the first American colony was Roanoke Island, North Carolina, in 1585. This is the point at which all law and firearms relevant to the U.S. should start, not these previous cases that applied only to the English and before the establishment of America. However, Roanoke would mysteriously vanish, and the first successful colony would be Virginia. The King's Royal Charter granted the colonists, their descendants, and anyone else whom they allowed to come to Virginia the perpetual right to bring arms there and to import arms from England, for defense or otherwise. A very similar charter would be granted later and be known as the 1620 New England Charter. In America, hunting was unrestricted. Anyone could hunt without condition. There were no limits on arms possession based on income. America was very much more free and independent right from the beginning, and this is where the spirit of American independence and freedom started. It wouldn't be until King George III that arms confiscation would take place, with the most well-known example occurring at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. Leading up to 1642, Charles I grew to abuse his power as king and sought a coup to overthrow the Parliament. He believed he had divine right from God to rule, and when his ambitions were met with resistance, it led to the bloodiest civil war on British soil. Charles was captured and then later executed in 1649. The Parliament abolished the office of king, the House of Lords, and made the country a commonwealth. Parliament became known as the Rump Parliament. In 1659, the Rump Parliament demanded that all householders register all their arms, ammunition, and horses. This, not helping matters in England, moved the country closer to another civil war. The head of the army would invite Charles II to resume the throne. Charles II ordered gunsmiths to report all gun sales and banned arms imports within 3 weeks of resuming the throne. He issued another order banning the import of all firearms and firearm parts, and later issued the 1661 and 1662 Militia Acts, which gave full control of the militia to the king and authorized the king's agents to search and seize all arms from anyone his lord lieutenants or their deputies deemed dangerous. Charles II would continue his total disarmament of the people with the Game Act of 1671. It banned the vast majority of the people from hunting and barred non-hunters from owning any guns or bows. It also authorized daytime searches of any home suspected of holding an illegal gun. These acts would lead up to Charles II's downfall and result in the Glorious Revolution of 1688 and the English Bill of Rights in 1689. I hope you are seeing how, despite being an English colony, America had a very different set of rules, sense of independence, and a somewhat disconnected reality with the laws issued in England. While Americans were English citizens and under the authority of the Crown, very few of the laws the English had to follow in England ever made their way to America or had real enforcement. Firearms were a big part of colonial American life. They were not restricted on what they could own, make, or import. The Americans had charters guaranteeing their right to arms for any purpose and had no restrictions on hunting. It was the exact opposite for the English. The only restrictions to the Americans would come just prior to the Revolutionary War, when the king tried to alter or terminate the charters that were issued, confiscate arms and powder, and restrict who could have arms. I hope you learned something new and see how history is somewhat repeating itself right now. Thanks for watching, and join us next week as we briefly go over portions of the English Bill of Rights and what the founders took from that.